Miss Marcus, you listen.
Harry, it won't help. It won't do any good.
It will help, damn it.
Do you realize that all of you don't have some horrible you hated that was part of you?
The 70s was a strange time for movies. It was a time when Hollywood was willing to take big risks. Sometimes they led to iconic masterpieces like Star Wars. Other times, those big risks led to big messes. Some of the movies we're about to talk about were trashed by critics, tanked at the box office, and often just left audiences scratching their heads. But these would-be disaster pieces didn't stay down. They rose from the ashes, eventually found their people, and became full-blown cult classics. So grab your popcorn and maybe a disco ball, because here are 6 1970s movies that were so bad, they were great.
Brad, please, let's get out of here.
For God's sake, keep a grip on yourself, Janet.
But it seems so unhealthy here.
It's just a party, Janet.
Let's kick things off with the big one. You probably saw this coming. The Rocky Horror Picture Show. It premiered in 1975 and immediately confused the heck out of both audiences and critics. The New York Times absolutely hated it, describing it as a low-budget freak show, cult, classic, cultural institution, although even they had to admit its soundtrack was catchy. But then the film began its midnight run at Waverly Theater, then in other cities. Late-night audiences started showing up in costume. They yelled lines at the screen. They danced. They made it interactive. And suddenly, this weird little musical became a cultural phenomenon. But with the charisma and talents of stars such as Tim Curry and Susan Sarandon, it's no surprise this initially panned film has become immortal. Curry's performance as Dr. Frankenfurter is legendary. He owns that role. And don't even get us started on Time Warp and Sweet Transvestite. They're practically karaoke staples now. This movie wasn't just ahead of its time, it ignored time completely, which is why it's still playing in theaters decades later.
Zardoz speaks to you.
Zardoz can only be described as a 70s fever dream. Sir Sean Connery stars as a futuristic executioner named Zed, wearing nothing but a red diaper, thigh-high boots, and a ponytail. And yes, it's every bit as strange as it sounds. Directed by John Boorman, who had just finished Deliverance, by the way, Zardoz threw audiences into a post-apocalyptic world filled with floating stone heads, immortality, and cryptic philosophy. It was marketed as sci-fi, but honestly, it felt more like an acid trip. Critics didn't know what to make of it, and evidently neither did audiences. For a long time, that's where it stood as a film. Some panned, largely forgotten experiment that failed to grab at audiences. But then, throughout the 90s and early 2000s, Zardoz eventually found an audience that appreciated its bold, experimental vibe. The weird costumes, the dense ideas, and Connery's completely unhinged performance make it a must-see for lovers of weird cinema. It's not good in a traditional sense, but it's unforgettable. And honestly, that's better.
Life and last. Salutations.
1974's Phantom of the Paradise was equal parts glam, gore, and glorious excess. Written and directed by Brian De Palma before he hit it big with Carrie and Scarface, this film is a bizarre mashup of Phantom of the Opera Faust and The Picture of Dorian Gray, all set to 70s rock opera. When it first hit theaters, it flopped hard. Critics were confused, audiences just weren't biting, and it faded quickly. To be fair, it was competing with the likes of Young Frankenstein and The Godfather Part 2 at the time, but that didn't mean the complete end for the film. For some reason, the city of Winnipeg, Canada became obsessed. The movie played there for years. Paul Williams, yes, that Paul Williams, wrote the music and starred as the evil record producer Swan. And the music? Surprisingly great. Tracks like Goodbye Eddie and Life at Last hit the sweet spot between satire and sincerity. Today, it's beloved for its insane visuals, catchy soundtrack, and the way it captures the sleazy side of showbiz. It's like Rocky Horror's weird, often underappreciated cousin.
Pretty soon I had my arm back again. Now I can't feel a damn thing in it.
If you're ready to take a look at something deeply unsettling, we'll turn to David Lynch's Eraserhead, which is less fun Friday night cinema and more pure nightmare projected onto a screen. Shot in stark black and white, full of industrial noise, and featuring one of the creepiest infants in film history, Eraserhead was pure art house horror. When the film debuted, critics were mostly baffled, if not disgusted. But underground film circles kept it alive. Midnight screenings and word of mouth made it a legend. By the 1980s, Eraserhead was being taught in film schools and championed by directors like Stanley Kubrick. It's not an easy watch. There's no clear plot, the visuals are disturbing, and the sound design makes your skin crawl. But once you've seen it, you never forget it. Who could forget a thing like that living cooked chicken? That's the power of Lynch. He doesn't explain, he just shows. And what he shows in Eraserhead is, well, it's certainly something.
Warriors, come out to play!
Yep, it's time for The Warriors, one of the most stylish and controversial movies of the 70s. Released in 1979 and directed by Walter Hill, it follows a street gang trying to fight their way back to Coney Island after being framed for murder. At the time, the film was blamed for inciting real-world gang violence. Several violent incidents were reported near theaters, and some chains even pulled the movie from circulation. Critics were split. Some praised the style, others hated the violence. But as years passed, people started to appreciate it as a kind of urban fairy tale. The critics were partly right in their complaints. It's not realistic, but it's not trying to be. It's a comic book come to life, and that's exactly why it works. Today, it's a staple of cult cinema, and it's influenced everything from video games to fashion. Death Race 2000 was a glorious mess of 70s exploitation cinema. Produced by Roger Corman and directed by Paul Bartel, it stars David Carradine as Frankenstein, a masked race car driver, and a young Sylvester Stallone as his rival. The concept? The world is under martial law, and racers take part in the transcontinental road race, during which innocent civilians must be run over for extra points. Satire or not, audiences were unsurprisingly horrified, and there were a wave of scathing reviews from critics in the papers. Even famed critic Roger Ebert, who could always see the best in films and its appeal to certain audiences, gave Death Race 2000 0 stars. A rating he declined to change even decades later when he admitted he no longer viewed it as disparagingly. Over time, however, audiences began to love it. It's bloody, it's ridiculous, and it's weirdly smart. Beneath the campy violence is a biting political satire about media, celebrity, and government control. Death Race 2000 paved the way for dozens of dystopian action flicks, and it even got a reboot in the 2000s. But nothing beats the original. It's pure 70s grindhouse. If you were an adult watching it, you hated it. But as a kid who managed to get past the ushers into the theater,
I loved him, but he didn't love me.
ah yes, At Long Last Love, the 1975 musical that made everyone ask, wait, is Burt Reynolds singing? Directed by Peter Bogdanovich, this film was supposed to be a stylish throwback to the golden age of 1930s musicals. It starred Reynolds, Sybil Shepherd, Madeline Kahn, and Duilio del Prete, all dancing and singing their way through a frothy high society love quadrangle set to the tunes of Cole Porter. And here's the kicker. Bogdanovich insisted they all sing live on set. No dubbing, no studio polish, just pure, unfiltered effort and enthusiasm. The result was one of the most critically savage movies of the decade. Audiences were baffled. Why were movie stars who couldn't sing or dance starring in a musical that required both? Having said all that, At long last, love is undeniably charming in its own clumsy way. The actors are clearly trying their hearts out, and there's a kind of sweet vulnerability to watching them stumble through songs with such sincerity. Over time, the film developed something of a cult following, and in 2013, a director's cut version surfaced, which some critics actually praised for its flow and wit. It's still a mess, but it's a mess with heart.
Hold the circle! River Manitu, help your brother! Hold Mesquamacus! Hold him!
The Manitu was a horror movie that dared to ask the question, what if a demonic Native American spirit was reincarnated as a tumor on a woman's neck? Released in 1978 and directed by William Girdler, the Manitu stars Tony Curtis as a New Age psychic named Harry Erskine, who gets pulled into a supernatural nightmare when his ex-girlfriend starts growing an evil shaman fetus on her back. Spoiler, it eventually grows into a full-grown man and launches a psychic battle in a hospital operating room with lasers in space. This movie had everything: levitating typewriters, ghostly wands, ancient tribal curses, and a climax that would make the fountain seem straightforward by comparison. Tony Curtis delivers a performance that falls somewhere between being completely committed and totally confused. And let's not forget the cast also includes Stella Stevens, Burgess Meredith, and Michael Ansara as Misquamacus, the resurrected shaman with a score to settle. Critics and horror fans didn't quite know what to make of it. Was it camp, exploitation, or just really weird sci-fi? But the thing about this utterly confused movie is that it's so over the top. It's irresistible. The movie fully commits to its bizarre premise and never looks back. It's unapologetically strange and unashamed of its goofy, practical effects. It's kind of awesome. For horror fans who love their scares with a side of 1970s cheese, The Manitu is a twisted little gem. These movies weren't polished, they weren't safe, but they were bold. Which terrible film from the 70s do you think should be included? Let us know in the comments. Now don't forget to crash your thumb or mouse into those like and subscribe buttons as if YouTube was the death race.